The salvage scanner's ping cut through the static like a blade through slick sharp, insistent, and completely wrong for this sector. Captain Joran Thrace frowned at the readout, his weathered fingers dancing across the control panel of the Wandering. Echo. Nothing should be broadcasting from Nix 7. The frozen moon had been scoured clean. 3 months ago, during the Zilani withdrawal, every piece of useful tech stripped bare. But there it was, a faint energy signature, pulsing weak and irregular against the cosmic background radiation. Probably just another dead beacon, Joran muttered to himself, adjusting course toward the signal. The words tasted like a lie, even as he spoke them. 20 years of salvage work had taught him to trust his instincts. And his instincts were screaming that something was very, very wrong down there. The wandering echo descended through Nix 7's thin atmosphere, her hull groaning against the pressure. Differential. Ice crystals formed constellation patterns across the viewport, each one catching and fracturing the pale light of the system's dying star. Below, the moon's surface stretched endlessly a canvas of gray stone and frozen methane, broken only by the occasional crater or the skeletal remains of war machines. The signal led him to a ravine carved deep into the moon's crust, its walls glittering with mineral deposits and old plasma scoring. At the bottom, half buried in crystalline snow, lay the twisted wreckage of a Zilani assault pod. The craft had hit hard, its sleek organic curves now bent and shattered, leaking bioluminescent fluid that had frozen into veins of blue-green ice. Joran set the ship down on a stable outcropping and suited up, checking his gear twice out of habit. The suit's heating elements hummed to life as he stepped onto the airlock platform, and his boots made no sound on the airless surface. Only the vibration through his soles and the soft whisper of his recycled breath marked his passage. The assault pod's emergency systems had failed completely. No lights, no power, no life support, just the fading warmth signature his scanner had. Detected from orbit. Joran approached the wreckage carefully, plasma cutter ready. Zilani biotechnology was notoriously unstable when damaged, prone to sudden energy discharges or toxic spills. He found the entry hatch twisted nearly off its hinges, hanging by threads of biometallic muscle fiber that had gone rigid in the cold. Inside, the pod's organic walls had collapsed inward, creating a maze of sharp protrusions and tangled support struts. Emergency foam had deployed and frozen solid, sealing several ruptures but also trapping whatever or whoever had been inside. The heat signature was stronger here, centered toward the rear of the pod. Joran began cutting through the foam, his cutter's beam hissing silently as it carved through the hardened material. Layer by layer, he worked deeper into the wreckage, following the thermal trail. Then he saw her. The Zilani warrior was wedged in the pod's rear compartment, her tall, lean frame folded awkwardly among the wreckage, armor once a masterwork of living metal, and bioceramic plating was cracked and torn, revealing patches of pale blue-gray skin beneath. Her head hung forward, curtained by long silver hair that had escaped from her damaged helmet. But it was her legs that made Joran's breath catch in his throat. Both limbs were gone below the knee, severed cleanly by what looked like high energy weapons fire. The wounds had been sealed with emergency biofoam, but crude work functional, rather than careful. Someone had patched her up just enough to keep her from bleeding out, but not enough to save her, not enough to bring her home. Her chest rose and fell in shallow, irregular breaths. Somehow, impossibly, she was still alive. Joran had seen Zilani warriors before, during his days as a combat medic in the border conflicts. He'd learned to respect them, even fear them. They were bred for war, genetically crafted for speed, strength, and an absolute dedication to their cause. They didn't surrender, didn't retreat, and they certainly didn't abandon their wounded. Except someone had abandoned this one, worked quickly, cutting away the remaining foam and debris that pinned her in place. Her armor's bio-readings were still active, painting warnings and flowing Zilani script across his helmet's translator. Display. Severe trauma, massive blood loss, hypothermia, neural shock, catalog of injuries that should have killed her hours ago. As he lifted her from the wreckage, her eyes fluttered open. They were the color of liquid mercury, bright against her alien features, and they fixed on him with an intensity that made him pause. For a moment neither moved. Then her lips parted, and she spoke in accented but clear human standard. "You should not have come." Her voice was barely a whisper, but each word was precisely formed, as if speaking incorrectly would be a greater failure than dying. "Yeah, well," Joran replied, adjusting his grip to support her weight more evenly. "I've always been bad at following advice." Something that might have been amusement flickered in her silver eyes before they closed again. She didn't speak during the journey back to his ship, didn't protest when he placed her in the medical bay, didn't react when the automated systems began their work. She simply endured, as if endurance was all she had left. But as Joran sealed the medical bay door and initiated the healing protocols, he heard something that made him pause, a sound so soft he almost missed it over the hum of the life support systems. She was humming, a low, mournful melody in a language he didn't recognize, the kind of song someone might sing to comfort themselves in the dark. It was hauntingly beautiful and absolutely heartbreaking. He stood there for a long moment, listening to that alien lullaby, and wondered what kind of people left their wounded to die alone on frozen moons. More importantly, he wondered what he was going to do with a half-dead Zilani warrior who, by all rights, should consider him an enemy. The scanner beeped softly, indicating that the initial medical scan was complete. Joran glanced at the readout and felt his blood run cold.
Ow.
The damage was extensive, but not fatal, not with proper care, which meant someone had made a choice to leave her behind. Someone had decided she wasn't worth saving. As he watched her still form through the medical bay's transparent aluminum window, Joran made a choice of his own. Whatever had happened to her, wherever she'd come from, she was alive. She was breathing. And as long as she was on his ship, she was under his protection. The wandering echo turned away from Nick Seven's frozen surface and began its journey into the dark between stars, carrying its unlikely cargo toward an uncertain future. Behind them, the assault pod's wreckage grew cold and still, keeping its secrets buried in crystalline snow. But some secrets, Joran would soon learn, have a way of following you home. Kestra Voss awoke to the unfamiliar sensation of warmth. Her silver eyes opened slowly, adjusting to the soft amber lighting of an alien medical bay. The air tasted wrong to clean, lacking the metallic bite of Zilani atmosphere processors. Gentle humming filled the space, not the harsh efficiency of military life support. Something almost ... peaceful. She tried to sit up and immediately regretted it. Pain lanced through her torso, and when she looked down, the absence hit her like a plasma bolt to the chest. Her legs, or what remained of them, were wrapped in clean bandages and elevated on padded supports. The stumps ended just below her. Knees sealed with biofoam that wasn't Zilani's standard issue. Easy there. The voice came from beside her bed. The human male from the crash site sat in a simple chair, his weathered face showing concern rather than the clinical detachment she expected. "You've been unconscious for 18 hours. Your body's still healing." Kestra's training kicked in. Automatically, she cataloged her surroundings. Single exit, no visible weapons, medical equipment she didn't recognize. The human Joran, her memory supplied, wore simple clothes, not military issue. His hands were empty, resting casually on his knees. "Why?" The word emerged as a rasp from her damaged throat. "Why what? Why did you not leave me to die with honor?" Joran's eyebrows raised slightly. "Honor? You were freezing to death and it crashed. Ship, I was discarded." The word tasted like poison, as combatant effective. "My death should have been swift and clean, not this prolonged mockery." She gestured at the medical equipment, the gentle lighting, the careful bandages. Zilani culture, extensive medical care was reserved for those who could return to service. Anything else was wasteful sentimentality. "This isn't mockery," Joran said quietly. "This is medicine. There's a difference." Kestra turned her face away. "You do not understand. I am keshed broken beyond repair. My caste bond is severed. I have no purpose, no function. You have saved something that was already dead." Joran was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried an edge she hadn't heard before. I used to be a combat medic. 8th Colonial Marines. Border conflicts with your people, actually. You know what I learned in 6 years of patching up soldiers? She looked back at him, despite herself. The ones who survived weren't always the strongest or the fastest. They were the ones who wanted to keep living. The ones who found new reasons to fight. He leaned forward slightly. Your people might have written you off, but your body didn't. Get the message. You're still here. That means something. It means I am defective. It means you're stubborn. He stood and moved to check her for line. Good. Stubborn keeps you alive when everything else fails. Kestra watched him work, noting the practiced efficiency of his movements. You were military? Was past tense? They had some philosophical differences with my methods, such as Joran's. Hands paused in their work. I thought saving lives was more important than following orders. Turns out the brass disagreed. He resumed adjusting her for. These days I salvage what others throw away, fix what's broken. Seems I'm still doing the same job, just with better hours. Despite herself, Kestra felt something almost like curiosity stir in her chest. And you believe I can be. Next. I believe you're not as broken as you think. He moved to a cabinet and retrieved a datapad. Your medical scans show extensive damage, but nothing that can't be worked around. The biofoam job on your legs was crude, but effective. With proper prosthetics and rehabilitation, you could regain most of your mobility. Prosthetics are for Keshtar. They mark one as incomplete. They mark you as adaptable. Joran pulled up a holographic display showing her bone structure. Besides, who's going to see them? Your people left you to die, remember? Their opinions don't carry much weight out here. The casual dismissal of Zilani judgment hit Kestra like a physical blow. No one spoke of her people with such indifference. They were feared, respected, hated, but never dismissed. You do not fear the Zilani? Joran shrugged. I respect their capabilities, but fear. Fear is what happens when you don't understand your enemy. I've seen Zilani warriors bleed, seen them make mistakes, seen them die. You're impressive, but you're not gods. Kestra stared at him, processing this casual heresy.
Ow.
In her culture, the warrior castes were revered as the pinnacle of genetic achievement. To suggest they were merely ... people ... was unthinkable, Joran said, moving toward the door. Tomorrow we start rehabilitation. Unless you'd prefer I drop you off at the nearest Zilani outpost? No? The word escaped before she could stop it. They would execute me for surviving when death was the honorable choice? Then I guess you'll have to find a new definition of honor. After he left, Kestra lay in the gentle amber light, staring at the ceiling. For the first time in her life, she was truly alone with her thoughts, free from the constant pressure of caste expectations and military hierarchy. It was terrifying, but somewhere beneath the terror, something else stirred. Something that felt dangerously like hope. 3 weeks into her recovery, Kestra had begun to understand why the humans had been so difficult to defeat in the border wars. They were infuriatingly adaptive. Again, Joran said, steadying the parallel bars as she struggled to balance on her. New prosthetic legs. The devices were crude by Zilani standards, mechanical rather than bio-integrated. Powered by simple servos and feedback sensors. But they worked after a fashion. Kestra gritted her teeth and took another halting step. The prosthetics felt wrong, alien, like wearing someone else's limbs. Her enhanced nervous system, designed for perfect integration with Zilani biotechnology, struggled to interpret the mechanical feedback signals. I'm not designed for this, she said, sweat beading on her pale skin. Zilani combat prosthetics interface directly with the spinal column. These ... things ... are primitive. These things are keeping you upright, Joran replied. And they're made from salvaged parts I had on hand? If you want bio-integrated limbs, you'll need to find a Zilani medical facility that won't execute you on site. She took another step, wobbling slightly. Why do you persist with this? I will never regain my former capabilities. Maybe not, but you might gain new ones. He moved to adjust the balance calibration on her left leg. Tell me about your training. What made you effective as a warrior? Speed, primarily. Enhanced reflexes, predictive combat algorithms, integrated weapon systems? No. He cut her off gently. Not the hardware. What made you effective? Kestra paused, considering. No one had ever asked her to separate her individual traits from her genetic modifications. I observed. Other warriors followed predictive patterns, but I watched for variations, anomalies. The hesitation bias they tried to train out of you? She nodded, surprised he remembered that detail from her fevered confessions during the early days of recovery. And that made you a better fighter? Eventually, when I learned to trust the hesitation instead of suppressing it. Joran smiled. Then you're already ahead of the game. Most soldiers never learn to think beyond their training. He gestured to the prosthetics. These aren't replacements for what you lost. They're tools for what you're becoming. Which is, I don't know yet. That's for you to decide. Over the following days, Kestra began to understand his meaning. The mechanical legs responded differently than her original limbs lower, but more stable, less precise, but more adaptable to varied terrain. She found herself developing new movement patterns, new approaches to balance and coordination. It was during a particularly frustrating session that she first began to see the possibilities. The servo response in the left ankle is lagging, she said, examining the joint mechanism. The feedback loop is inefficient. Yeah, I know. Not best I could do with the parts I had. But if we rerouted the neural interface through the hip stabilizer instead of the knee joint, She trailed off, her mind racing through the possibilities. Joran raised an eyebrow. You understand human prosthetic engineering? Understand? Systems integration. Biological, mechanical, or hybrid, the principles are similar. She looked up at him. May I examine the technical specifications? Be my guest? For the next several hours, Kestra immersed herself in the schematics and component analyzes. Joran's engineering was competent but conservative, focused on reliability over performance. She began to see ways to optimize the systems, to bridge the gap between human mechanical engineering and Zilani biointegration principles. Here, she said finally, indicating a series of modifications on the holographic display. Redistribute the power coupling, add feedback dampeners to reduce response lag. Modify the joint articulation to allow for greater range of motion. Joran studied her proposals. This is pretty advanced stuff. Where did you learn systems engineering? Zilani warriors receive basic technical training. We must be able to maintain our equipment in the field. She hesitated, but I was curious about the integration between biological and artificial systems. It was considered an unusual interest for a combat specialist. Unusual how? Warriors view prosthetics and augmentations as temporary solutions. I wondered if they could be permanent improvements. Joran grinned. Looks like you're about to find out. They spent the next week implementing her modifications. Working together, they transformed the crude mechanical legs into something approaching elegance. The new design incorporated feedback systems that adapted to Kestra's neural patterns, servo responses that anticipated her movements, joint mechanisms that allowed for fluid motion across varied terrain. When she took her first steps with the upgraded prosthetics, the difference was remarkable. The mechanical delay was gone, replaced by smooth, responsive movement that felt almost natural. How do they feel? Joran asked. Kestra took a few experimental steps, then broke into a cautious jog. The prosthetics responded smoothly, their servo systems humming quietly as they adapted to her gait. She felt tears forming in her silver eyes, the first tears she had shed since childhood. Different, she said finally. Mine. That night, as the wandering echo drifted through the darkness between systems, Kestra stood at the observation deck, watching distant stars wheel slowly past. Her new legs supported her weight easily, their mechanical muscles tireless and precise. She was no longer the warrior she had been. But perhaps, as Joran had suggested, she was becoming something new. Something that belonged neither to the Zilani caste system nor to human society, but to herself alone. For the first time since the crash, that prospect didn't terrify her. The proximity alarm shattered the peaceful quiet of the wandering echo's common area, its harsh electronic shriek cutting through the soft hum of the ship's systems. Joran was on his feet instantly, muscle memory from his military days overriding the relaxed posture he'd adopted during the past month of peaceful travel. "What is it?" Kestra asked, rising smoothly from her chair with the fluid grace her new prosthetics allowed. The mechanical legs responded to her movements without hesitation. Now, their servo systems perfectly calibrated to her neural patterns. "3 ships dropping out of hyperspace," Joran said, studying the tactical display as they hurried toward the bridge. "Configuration unknown, but they're running dark no identification signals, no come traffic. Distance, to light minutes, and closing fast." He slid into the pilot's seat and began bringing the ship's systems online. Could be pirates, could be customs enforcement, could be Zilani death squads. Kestra's voice was flat, emotionless. She moved to the sensor station with practiced efficiency, her fingers dancing across the controls. "Yes, 3 Void Talon. Class interceptors. Military configuration." Joran felt ice form in his stomach. "Looking for you, most likely?" She called up a detailed scan of the approaching ships. "They are broadcasting a wide-spectrum search pattern, scanning for Zilani biosignatures. Can they detect you from this distance?" Kestra was quiet for a moment, studying the sensor data. Not with standard equipment, but these ships had been modified. Enhanced sensor arrays, extended range scanners. She looked at him, her silver eyes reflecting the bridge's emergency. "Lighting. They were sent specifically to find me." The CUM system crackled to life, filled with harsh syllables in the flowing Zilani language. Kestra translated automatically. "Unknown vessel. You are ordered to submit to boarding and inspection. Comply immediately or face termination." Joran's hands moved across the flight controls, bringing the ship around to a new heading. "Any chance they'll just let us go if we cooperate?" "None." Kestra's response was immediate. "If they find me alive, they will execute me for surviving when death was the honorable choice. If they find you with me, they will execute you for interfering with Zilani justice." "Justice." Joran's voice carried a bitter edge. "They left you to die, because I was marked as Keshtar. The fact that I survived means I have violated the natural order." She turned to face him fully. "They will not stop until I am dead.
All this
Is not negotiable." The wandering echo shuddered as Joran pushed the engines to full power, but the pursuing ships were faster, designed for interception and pursuit. On the tactical display, the distance between them continued to shrink.
"Tell you."
"Me something," Joran said, wrestling with the ship's controls as they entered a dense asteroid field. "If you're marked for death, why send 3 military interceptors? Seems like overkill for 1 injured warrior." Kestra was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice carried a weight he hadn't heard before. "There is something I have not told you about why I was truly abandoned. I'm listening. The mission where I lost my legs. It was not a standard combat operation. We were sent to retrieve intelligence about human biological weapon research. Data that could have changed the course of the war." Joran felt the pieces clicking into place. "And you found it?" "Yes. But what I discovered was not human weapons research. It was Zilani research. My own people were developing biological agents designed to target specific human genetic markers. Weapons that would kill selectively, leaving infrastructure intact but eliminating entire populations. The asteroid field provided temporary cover, but Joran knew it was only a matter of time before the interceptors found them. And you opposed this. I transmitted the data to both Zilani High Command and human intelligence networks. I believed both sides had a right to know what was being developed in their name." Her voice hardened. "The High Command declared me a traitor. The plasma fire that took my legs was not enemy action. It was from my own squad leader. They tried to execute you for telling the truth. They tried to execute me for betraying the cause. The abandonment was meant to ensure my silence. A traitor's death, slow and shameful, with no chance to spread further contamination. The ship shook as weapons fire began to impact nearby asteroids. The interceptors had found them. So why the death squads now? Kestra moved to the weapons control station, her new legs carrying her with mechanical precision. Because I am still alive. And as long as I draw breath, I remain a potential source of intelligence about Zilani biological weapons programs. Even without your legs, especially without my legs. A crippled warrior generates sympathy. It makes humans more willing to listen, more likely to trust. She began powering up the ship's defensive systems. They cannot allow that risk. The wandering echo burst from the asteroid field into open space. The 3 interceptors closed behind. Their sleek, organic hulls gleamed in the starlight, weapon ports glowing with barely contained energy. Options? Joran asked, pushing the ship into a diving turn that made the hull groan with stress. We can surrender and die with dignity, or we can fight and die with purpose. Those are pretty limited options. Kestra looked at him, and for the first time since he'd found her, she smiled. It was a fierce expression, all sharp angles and predatory. Grace, then perhaps it is time to create new ones. She activated the ship's communication system and spoke in rapid, formal Zilani. The response from the lead interceptor was immediate and angry. What did you tell them? Joran asked. That I formally request single combat under the old codes. Honored duel between warriors. Do they have to accept? No, but refusing would mark them as cowards before their crews. Zilani warrior pride will not allow that. The interceptors slowed their pursuit, maintaining weapons lock but not firing. A new voice came over the comm, speaking in heavily accented. Human standard, traitor Voss? You dare invoke the warrior codes after your betrayal? Kestra keyed the mic. I invoke the right of Kethmaran trial by combat. My honor against yours, Commander Vexstar. Joran glanced at her. You know him? Former squad leader? The one who shot me? Her smile grew sharper. He has been hunting me for months. This is personal for him. The codes require equal footing, the voice continued. You are Keshtar. Incomplete. Combat is meaningless. Then you have nothing to fear from a crippled traitor. The silence stretched for long seconds. Then very well, single ships, no interference. When you die, your human companion will be spared as per the ancient agreements. Kestra looked at Joran. Can you pilot one of the interceptors? In theory? But you can't seriously be considering this. They will never stop hunting me. This is the only way to end it. She stood, her prosthetic legs steady beneath her. Besides, I have advantages they do not expect. Such as... She gestured to her mechanical limbs. These do not feel pain. They do not tire. They do not fear death, because they were never truly alive. Her silver eyes gleamed. And I have learned to fight like a human with adaptation instead of tradition. The wandering echo docked with the smallest interceptor, its automated systems transferring control to Kestra's neural interface. As she prepared to transfer ships, Joran grabbed her arm. Don't do this. We can run. Find another way. There is no other way. She covered his hand with her own. But thank you, Joran Thrace, for showing me that there is more than one definition of honor. She disappeared into the interceptor, leaving Joran alone on his bridge as the two ships separated. On the tactical display he watched as Kestra's ship and Vexstar's interceptor moved apart, circling each other like predators preparing to strike. What followed was unlike any space combat he had ever witnessed. The dance began in silence. Two Zilani interceptors, sleek as hunting birds, circled each other in the vast emptiness between stars. Their movements were precise, calculated, following patterns that had been refined over centuries of warrior tradition. But something was different about the smaller ship. Its trajectory held subtle variations. Its micro-corrections that suggested improvisation rather than programmed response. Aboard the wandering echo, Joran watched the tactical display with growing tension. The two ships were perfectly matched in terms of weaponry and speed, but he knew Kestra was operating at a severe disadvantage. Her opponent, Commander Vexstar, was uninjured and flying with a full Zilani neural interface. Kestra had to rely on mechanical prosthetics and adaptive controls. First blood to the challenger. Vextar's voice crackled over the cum, his tone carrying the formal cadence of ancient ritual. Honor demands precision. Death demands certainty. Kestra's response came not in words, but in action. Her interceptor suddenly broke from the circling pattern, diving beneath Vextar's ship in a maneuver that violated every principle of Zilani combat doctrine. Plasma fire erupted from her weapons, not aimed at critical systems as tradition demanded, but scattered across her opponent's hull in what appeared to be random targeting. Desperation, Vextar sneered. Gotten even the basics of honorable combat? But Joran understood what Kestra was doing. Scattered shots weren't random. They were creating weak points in the enemy ship's bioarmor, stress fractures that would compound under pressure. It was a human tactic, focused on cumulative damage rather than single decisive strikes. The two ships spun around each other in increasingly complex patterns. Vextar fought with textbook precision, his attacks aimed at specific system vulnerabilities. According to Zilani tactical doctrine, Kestra adapted constantly, using her ship's damaged systems as camouflage, making her movements unpredictable by incorporating the limitations of her mechanical legs into her flight patterns. "You fight like a scavenger," Vextar said, his calm beginning to crack as his perfect shots failed to connect.
Where's your warrior's pride?"
"I discarded it," Kestra replied, her voice steady over the cum. "Along with the delusion that honor lies in following predictable patterns." Her ship suddenly reversed thrust, a maneuver that should have been impossible for a Zilani pilot. Their bio-integrated systems couldn't compensate for such extreme directional changes. But Kestra's mechanical legs absorbed the G-forces that would have crushed organic limbs, and her interceptor spun end over end, bringing its weapons to bear on Vextar's undefended rear arc. The plasma blast took out his primary engine, sending his ship tumbling through space. Emergency systems kicked in, stabilizing his flight, but the damage was severe. "Impossible," he snarled. "You are Kestar, broken, incomplete." "Yes, Kestra," said simply, "and that makes me unpredictable." She could have finished him then. A single shot would have breached his life support systems, ending the duel according to the ancient codes. Instead, she held fire. "I offer you a choice, Vextar. Surrender, and live with the knowledge that you were defeated by a broken warrior. Continue, and die for the pride of commanders who sent you to clean up their failures. There's no choice for a true warrior." His interceptor's emergency thrusters fired, pushing the damaged ship into a final attack run. Weapons blazing, he charged directly at Kestra's position, a suicide run that would take them both if it connected. For a moment, Joran thought she would simply accept the death. It would have been the Zilani way, honorable, mutual destruction rather than shameful survival. But at the last second, Kestra's ship twisted aside with inhuman precision, her mechanical legs allowing her to tolerate G-forces that would have killed an augmented pilot. Vextar's ship flashed past, its weapons fire missing by mere meters. Without its primary engine, the interceptor couldn't correct its trajectory. It tumbled away into the darkness, its pilot's frustrated curses echoing over the cum until distance swallowed the signal. The remaining two interceptors held their positions, their crews apparently unsure how to respond to this unprecedented outcome. The ancient code spoke of death or surrender. They had no provision for an opponent simply ... leaving. Kestra's ship returned to the wandering echo, docking with practiced efficiency. When she emerged from the airlock, her silver eyes were bright with something Joran had never seen before: satisfaction. Not the grim acceptance she'd shown during her recovery, but genuine pride in her accomplishment. "How do you feel?" he asked. "Different." She moved toward the bridge with smooth, confident strides. Her prosthetic legs carried her with mechanical precision, but somehow she made the artificial limbs look natural. "I am no longer Zilani, but I am also not human. I am something new. And what is that exactly?" She smiled, the first genuinely happy expression he'd seen from her. "Free." The interceptors were moving away, their formation broken. Over the cum came a final transmission in formal Zilani. "The codes are satisfied. The matter is closed." As the ships vanished into hyperspace, Kestra sat beside Joran on the bridge. Together they watched the stars' wheels slowly past, the vast emptiness no longer feeling like isolation but like possibility. "So what now?" Joran asked. Now we decide what to do with this freedom. She gestured to the star charts displayed on the navigation console. There are others like me, warriors discarded by their own people, soldiers abandoned by the causes they served. Perhaps it is time someone offered them a different choice. Joran studied her profile, noting the determination in her expression. You want to help them? I want to show them what I learned from you. That honor is not about following orders or fulfilling predetermined roles. It is about choosing to act according to your own principles, regardless of what others expect. That sounds like the start of something big. Kestra nodded, her mechanical fingers dancing across the control panels with growing confidence. Something revolutionary. As the wandering echo changed course toward the Outer Rim systems, where wars left their casualties scattered like debris across forgotten worlds, Joran realized that their story was just beginning. They had both been discarded by the organizations. They served, marked as failures by those who valued conformity over conscience. But sometimes, he reflected, the best salvage came from the pieces others threw away.